Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm going to be talking about being a greedy noob and why I am exactly one for what I'm going to do inside this game. Firstly, let's talk about this, the tier 10 Czechoslovakian light tank, the Tesak, if you haven't seen them just absolutely filling up the matchmaker over the last couple of months since they were added into the game. Although now I think things are starting to calm down a little bit for the Tesak. People are starting to get a little bit more bored of their mechanics and realizing that they're just not actually very competitive vehicles. However, if you're willing to try hard, you can actually still do pretty okay things with regards to fun in this tank, but still, at least in my opinion, never really packing the win ratio that you would do if you were playing a more competitive light tank. And it's interesting because I still find myself kind of wanting to play this vehicle, and that is because it is fun. There is a certain fun to just dumping out a mag there and to holding down the mouse button. But the problem is that, as we can see, I dealt 324 damage with hitting all of those shots against that Tesak. But all it takes is just one shot from a Progetto, and you're kind of getting out-traded. And when you've got 1,470 hit points, yeah, you're not going to be doing very well if you're making trades like that. And again, the EBR catches me. 400 damage, and it doesn't really matter if he only exposes himself for a second. I'm not going to do very much damage to him, only like 150 damage. And suddenly the Tesak doesn't look so pretty. So I was hoping, with this tank's 12 degrees of gun depression, that we'd be able to hold that ridge to try and punish our opponents. But when you've got absolutely nobody in the field stopping them from cresting that ridge, then there's no control on the Tesak. There's no pressure on the opponents to have to turn their turrets around. And while we can pulse in a little bit of damage at decent distances from the T-22 medium, we really kind of need a bigger gun, maybe like a Grilla or something to flank around. However, sometimes you're just not going to have the tank destroyers who go into those kind of positions. And to be fair, that position up north, where I'm looking at right now, kind of like this A3 area, it's very good at stopping them from controlling that mid-ridge, and it's very important for holding them back in that scenario. But if they don't push, then it doesn't ever really get to do anything. So I can understand why players would gravitate more towards either the south or gravitate more towards the center of this map. So I've got a couple of big tips for you in this vehicle, and that is apparently the low shell velocity there with that elevation meant that I just whiffed that whole EBR mag. So a couple of big tips for the Tesak, and what helped me really have not only just more fun, but start to get bigger damage results in this tank. This vehicle is heavily based around the amount of dispersion that you can reduce upon firing. You see that the way the reticle blooms out. In my Tesak tank review, I showed you that the improving the gun handling with things like vert stabs, a rotation device, or experimental mobility means that you do massive amounts more damage at decent distances. We're talking about kind of like 50% more damage because you're, if you want to fire at max speed, that is, per mag, because you're just whiffing so many shots as soon as you're engaging like 300. Now, if you're close quarters combat, it doesn't really matter. Another thing I'd like to mention about the Tesak is that the experimental mobility on this vehicle, which improves the vehicle's turret traverse speed. It's got very good turret traverse. It's got 60 degrees a second turret traverse. But when you're in close quarters combat with your opponents, to be able to improve that a little bit more to stop them from being able to flank around you. And this tank, it's very nimble, and you're often using it to try and just you're constantly firing at your opponents in close quarters combat, but you're also wanting to be able to outmaneuver them to avoid their shells, while also still getting just constant shells in. And oh dear, that's an HE mag there. That was 1,076 damage to the Tesak. That's another one of my big tips in this tank. You must have intuition, you must switch out the magazines, and those HE shells revolutionize what you can do with a Tesak. If you manage to pen a full AP mag on this tank, you're doing 900 damage. If you manage to pen a full HE mag on this tank, it is 1,800. It's staggering, and this thing can, for example, remove an entire FE405 from the game. So I'd recommend you mostly take regular rounds, probably about at least two, if not 3 or maybe 4 mags of HE on this tank, and don't really take too many APCR rounds. This vehicle's not meant to kind of like just do damage to heavily armored targets. It's meant to make flanking plays or to try and engage lightly armored targets to be able to make the gun work. It's a really interesting game here. We're down by 9,000 hit points and down by 3 kills, but we're going to still do everything that we can to try and come back into this one. So I was hoping that I'd be able to spot this Progetto without proxy spotting them, but now I get proxy spotted, I realize I have to go forwards, otherwise the STRV-103B will be able to shoot me up from that ridge. So it's kind of like this annoying situation. If I reversed back, I could probably dump this Progetto in the turret, but if I do that, then I'm going to get destroyed by their tank destroyer, and I just can't risk that. So with a game this tight, we're going to need every tank that we can, and hopefully as long as Jaeger doesn't low roll, it should be one less tank for the enemy team. Beautiful stuff. So my other big tip for the Tesak, and this is one of the biggest differences I made on this tank, is that when you're engaging tanks that are moving and you want to, and they're at decent distances, don't use the full zoom in. You can do full zoom in against stationary tanks if for some reason you really want to just make sure your shells are going towards the weakest point of their vehicle. But if they're moving, just use like 2 times zoom or at most 4 times zoom, because by zooming out, you'll see where your shell traces are going, and it will allow you to adjust the lead that you have to give to the target. This tank doesn't have very good shell velocity at all, 800 meters a second on its standard rounds. But if you do zoom out, then you'll be able to gauge where the shells are going. And whether you should pulse in this tank is another question. Pulsing, if you know it's the last chance that you have to shoot at the target, might be valid. But for the most part, really what you want to do is just aim central mass and just go absolutely raging ham on your opponents. As I'm pulsing just to make sure these shells go in, but we managed to do 777 damage there. So that's still 900 damage that was missed against the 60 TP there, unless the first shells that were firing at them didn't manage to go off. And it looks like this bot just moved the turret a little bit. I'm not complaining about getting to farm a full health 60 TP. And suddenly, a game that we were down by like 9,000 hit points, now that we've got a free 2,500 damage there against the 60 TP, maybe this is going to be the one of the biggest comebacks I have this year, in a Tesak at least. Oh, wait, so we know there's an STRV above us. Having dumped out all of those AP mags, I'm actually going to go for an HE mag here against an STRV, hoping that I was going to get up right behind them and then be able to get full HE pens into the rear of the tank. Now I feel like I have to track the guy to stop him, and I do actually manage to do 983 damage there to the STRV. So that was more damage than I would have done with an AP mag if I'd penetrated all the shells, unless I rolled like extra high. So now we're going to see, shall we go for a second HE mag here, or should we try and get behind the vehicle in this scenario? And I actually completely whiffed this mag. I only do 450, and my AP mag would have definitely killed him. So a complete waste of my HE mag, and that's not a good thing to get rid of, because that's like your emergency mag for when you're right up behind a tank. But man, this Tesak's damage per minute at 2,887 base, when you get kind of like bond vents on this thing as well, or in my case bounty vents, yeah, the damage this thing does is staggering. And that's a whole STRV just ripped apart after ripping apart a whole 60 TP. Okay, so I was thinking, wow, we're really going to be able to come back into this game. What a comeback. From at the start, from losing those hit points to the EBR, from losing those hit points to the Progetto, and just being so far behind, to now have an opportunity to maybe come back into this. Oh, it's tantalizing right now. So we see that Progetto 65, and that is possibly the Progetto 65 who shot me at the start of the battle, but there were 2 of them, so we won't know for sure. Maybe this Gorilla's going to be able to finish off the Progetto. They are, so I'm going to turn my tank around and still go for the E3. So yeah, one of the biggest changes I made on this tank was for my combat build, experimental turbo, because otherwise the vehicle is too slow to contest positions. And the Bonvert stabs with the stabilizer greasing really ended up helping me out. And once you do that, your gun feels 857 against the back of a T110E3. And now we've got 1 minute and 19 seconds to find an M60 that's on 600 hit points. What a game. Even if we were to take away like the 2,500 damage that we got to farm against the 260, I'm still very happy with this for this round. To be up above like 4,000 damage after that really ugly start. And so definitely consider investing into the experimental turbo on this tank, and Bonvert stabs, and even the stabilizer greasing, if you have a bunch of them, can be great. So right now, I'm going to ping the map, and I'm going to make a bit of a misplay. If I'd gone into the cap circle, I think I would have been able to win this game. But I'm not going to lie. At this stage, I was grinding for my 3rd mark of excellence on the Tesak. And so instead of going and just getting a free win in a game where there's now only 30 seconds left, I feel like I'm just going to try and sneak up on the M60 and see if we can get our final mag. We've got 76 shells of AP left. So let's slow the battle down here. It does look pretty cool. This is going to be 16 times speed now. And you'll get to see what this gun feels like in 16 times motion. It's actually kind of fun to just watch this and to see how both of the barrels go at the back of an M60. If you ever wanted to see a slow-mo Tesak, you can see each of those individual shells going towards the M60 here, up to 107, 129. Yeah, each one of the shells doing like about 12, 24 damage now with these kind of APs. And yeah, this is 16 times speed now. Uh-oh. Oh no. Not like this. Really, not like this. Not like this. Not like this. No snapshot. Uh-oh. Yeah, ladies and gents, I got caught, and the Jaegeru is not going to have a shot. The artillery is going to miss theirs, and the guerrilla's not going to be able to find them as well. And so that means that the 260 left in the cap circle is literally a second away, probably about 2 seconds away from winning this game. So the 260 in the cap circle did the right thing. They capped. Me, like a greedy little noob, went off to try and push their damage total over 7,000 to try and get closer towards my third mark of excellence in a game that I thought would be an easy win. Instead, it turns out that Joey Tankist in 1971 gets the one that everybody wants, the Kolobanov's medal for winning a 1 versus 5 fight, as this was an assault game. And if the defending team doesn't get vanquished, then they win. So congratulations to Joey Tankist for that near 6,000 damage game and getting one of the rarest medals in the game, the Kolobanovs, because Uncle QuickyBaby is apparently an absolute greedy little noob. So multiple takeaways here. Don't count your chickens until they've hatched, you know. Get into that cap circle, finish the game, give yourself a win condition, and don't be greedy and go and chase, even if you are getting close to having your third mark of excellence. There'll be more games with more damage opportunities, but this will forever be a defeat in my personal record that I could never get back. And my other recommendations are don't over-zoom in a Tesak against moving targets. Use the shell tracers to see how you have to adjust your lead, and it will massively increase your damage at decent distances. Secondly, do everything that you can to reduce the bloom after firing. Vert stabs, experimental turbo. I wouldn't really recommend a rotation device. I think you definitely need a turbo on the Tesak to be able to contest those early positions. And stabilizer greasing are great ways of doing this. And thirdly, look for those vulnerable targets with those HE mags. And I guess my overall conclusion of the Tesak is, sure, I think it's probably the worst tier 10 light tank in the game by far. If we take a look at the recent performance of all of the tier 10 lights, I'd be very surprised if the Tesak wasn't bottom by a mile. Yeah, it is. It's even worse than the Sheridan. It's actually getting a sub 47% average win rate. However, what I will say is that even though I'm losing more games than I would do if I was playing something more competitive like a 13105 or a Manticore, it's actually still really fun tank. And so props to Wargaming for making a fun game mechanic that is enjoyable to play without it, I guess, completely changing how competitive light tanks are in World of Tanks. Let me clarify, I'm in no way suggesting that Wargaming shouldn't consider buffs to the Tesak. I think a little bit more ammunition for the vehicle, a few more hit points for the vehicle, a little bit of camo rating for the vehicle, or at least 10 meters view range for the tank would help it out. But unless you're the kind of player who only has fun when they're winning, then the Tesak, even as the worst tier 10 light tank, I'm still going to recommend it for some fun inside World of Tanks. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below, what is your confession about some of the noob things that you do inside World of Tanks? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.